class, that slightly snooze-inducing class of arranging your color palettes. And don't worry about it. I don't know if you watched the whole thing. Trust me, I'll know. So today we're going to be talking about lighting. This class is hopefully going to change the way you look at shadows forever. Shadows make the picture. I have a very easy way of learning it, and I'm going to teach it to you. And I have a feeling a lot of you are going to be amazed. So I drew this out, and these are all those new vocabulary words that I was talking about. By knowing these vocabulary words, it's going to change your art. So let's dive right into it. First thing we're going to talk about is lighting in general, okay? You have two different types of lighting. You have direct source lighting and you have ambient lighting. Ambient's a drug. Ambient. Okay, we have attempt number 2, ambient. So let me start this again. We have two different lighting sources. One is your direct source and one is your ambient light. Your direct light source is the sun or a light bulb. Your ambient light is light that comes from the direct sunlight and it bounces off of things in the room. So it would create something called the reflective shadow, which we'll talk about in just a minute. So we have the direct light source coming down and ambient light. Now here's a trick. People don't know how big to make a shadow. You put your pencil on the direct light source, any direction that's coming, and just kind of eyeball a line going down. And there you will have your cast shadow size. That's just a little trick. So now we have our object, and everybody uses a ball. It is the easiest thing for you to understand. I could have made it a cylinder. It could be anything, but we're going to just use the ball like every art class in America has always used. You have certain things in creating a sphere, okay? The way the light hits the sphere. We're going to take something called the terminator line, okay? This is the terminator line. Right here. Your terminator line would be the point where the light starts to go into the darkness. So you have your light. This would be your brightest spot. The light hits right here first. Okay? This is called center light. It is not the highlight. Okay, we're going to talk about highlights in a minute. This point over here is your center light. It is the closest to your light source. Your direct light source, okay? Your sun or your lamp. So here we have the center light. Very important. As the ball curves, okay, your tones are going to change. Remember all those tones that we talked about in creating the grayscale? Well, here they are. Here are your halftones. Okay, so you have halftone, center light. Then there's going to get to be a point on that sphere or the object where it starts to go into darkness. And a lot of people don't make that pronounced enough. And here you have your terminator line. As the ball continues into the darkness, so now you're going around and into the darkness, suddenly you have a light. Okay, it brightens up again. Why? Because your ambient light, not to be confused with ambient light, is hitting down here. Light travels in a straight line. Well, it's hitting here, bouncing off of here, and projecting it onto here. And that's why the bottom is a little bit brighter. So you have your center light, your halftones, until it gets to be the terminator line, plunges into the darkness, kind of like 2020, and goes into your reflective shadow until you get to the point where the object smashes into the earth or whatever it's sitting on, And that is the point where it becomes the darkest in the whole picture. And that's your occlusion shadow. We have the occlusion shadow, which is right underneath, not on top of the object, but right directly underneath, right there. And it goes to the point where the object starts to lift up from the page. Your occlusion shadow should not be out here. Okay, we're going to talk about the phases of cast shadow in just a minute. It should be directly in the area where the light is blocked almost completely. But do not render that in black. Not until the very, very end of your picture. Always leave tones. And when we start doing pictures, you're going to see what I'm talking about. So this would be like a 70 to 90% if 70 was like your second to darkest on the gray. I should mention that. Okay. And then that's your occlusion shadow. So you have occlusion shadow, reflective shadow, to your terminator line, creating your halftones until you get to your center light, the closest to the direct light source. Now we got this thing called the highlight, which everybody confuses for center light. Highlight and center light are completely different things. Now, what is the highlight? That's a reflection, okay? It reflects the direct light source, whether it be a light, the outside, the sun coming in through a window, and you would have this big white spot. The center light is the color of the object. It doesn't change. A highlight is white. Now, where do you put this highlight? Do you put it in the middle of the center light? Do you put it on, where do you put it? And a lot of people get confused with this. A highlight will move around your object as your eyes move. It's not stationary. So if you're standing over here and the light source is here, you might have it over here, your highlight. If you're standing over here and your direct light is over here, it would be over here. Okay? And usually there is a reflection and you might reflect it onto here. So that's why you have your highlights in different places. Like when we were doing the water droplet, and you can look at 100 pictures of a water droplet, they're not all the same. It all depends on where the person was standing when they drew that water droplet. Also shows you how matte or sheen a picture is. Is the object slick? If the object has several highlights, because it could be reflecting everywhere, we could be talking about water. Very reflective, shiny, bounces off, reflects everything onto it, all the colors in the room, everything into it. So you might have multiple highlights all over the page, and that object is going to look wet and slick. But if, say, you eliminate your highlight and you don't put a highlight in there at all, that object is going to appear as if it has a matte finish or it does not reflect. It could be the same color object. I could do them in the reds and the blues and the yellows and whatever. If I don't put that highlight in, that is the light that's going to tell me whether I have a red ice cube or I have a dull plastic, okay? So this is a very important lesson, but it's not hard to understand. Now we're going to talk a little bit about cast shadows. Now I already told you the trick. The lighting source, you draw your line, and that's where it ends. Now, you can go a little bit past it. Nobody's gonna say anything to you. So if your direct lighting source, say your direct lighting is coming from here. You got the sun coming right up there. Your cast shadow is going to be different. Your shadow is going to go down and straight. And what does that do? Well, it makes this side of the shadow very small. This side of the shadow would be long. So it's a very easy way never to forget how big or where to put your shadows. Is all you do is that line. You don't have to draw it on your paper. You can use a ruler and just look at your lines. So wherever you put your light source. Now, in the situation where you're uplighting, sometimes you have like Halloween is coming up and you have a light source coming from down below. It would be the same thing. Up and up. And that light would cast the shadow from here to here. It remains the same. So it's very easy. I didn't say art was hard. You just got to know what you're doing. That is cast shadow. Now, another thing about cast shadow, that is when you talk about your occlusion shadow. As the shadow breaks away, all this light is coming in, okay? Your shadow is going to get lighter and lighter as it goes out. Bring in your occlusion shadow, that very dark area, right, only coming up to where that object lifts off the ground, because as it lifts off the ground, light can get in. So you have this really dark underneath every object. So now, say you're still afraid of shadows. You're not going to be scared of a dark line. Jump into it with just putting in your occlusion shadows. Once you see how much better your picture looks, then you can start working your way out with cast shadows. Now, what do I do for my cast shadows? Well, I've discovered Copic markers. Shadows are very, very soft. The edges are soft, okay? And they're blurred. It's very hard to do that with a pencil. So I've discovered the magic of Copic markers, and I use C1. I have C1 through C5 and W1 through W5. But if you get 1, 3, and 5, it's fine too. There's no, if you're gonna do a really dark shadow sometimes and you get a little lazy, like I ran out of C1, you can use C2, C3, and this is the sketch line of markers. And I used a brush sketch. By starting out very light, you can work your tones in darker. So C1 or W1 would be out here, where the C5 would be creating my cast shadows, and then, my occlusion shadow, and then I just have to take a little bit of my pencil and darken that in. And that's the whole mystery surrounding cast shadows. So I hope this has helped you. We are not done with this lesson because we're going to start drawing soon and coloring soon. All these concepts that I've been giving you are going to start to make sense when we actually go in to do the picture. And I will see you in my next lesson. Take care.